Hey guys, welcome to solution video 2.3. This is textbook pages 62 and 63. Remember, you're to be here only if you need a little bit of assistance or if you are here to check all your solutions. But please be sure that all of the following work is completed before you come here. And like I said, if you need just a tiny bit of help with an example or two. So let's begin. So we're going to start with numbers 1 through 10 all. Number 1 asks us to explain how we find the difference between -4/5 minus -3/5. So the solution is we're going to rewrite the minus sign as add the opposite. Then you add the signs since they are the same and you keep the negative. Okay, it asks us to explain the problem, not to solve the problem. Okay, explain. Number 2, which expression does not belong with the other 3, and explain. So what we're going to do to find the one that doesn't belong, we're going to take a look at all the numbers and possibly rewrite them and see which one's different. So for this first example, I have -5/8. I see minus, I'm going to write this as plus opposite. So I'm going to take the opposite, which would be -3/4. This second example, let me just move this over. The second example is -3/4 plus 5/8. This third example is already an addition. We have -5/8 plus -3/4. And this last one, I see minus, so I'm going to change this to plus and this to the opposite. So -3/4 plus opposite. So when I take a look at these, here I see -5/8, here I see +5/8, -5/8, -5/8, and we're adding to it -3/4, -3/4, -3/4, -3/4. So the one that's different is this second one because the 5/8 is not negative. So the one that doesn't belong is -3/4 plus 5/8. And explain your reasoning, you will write that -5/8 minus 3/4 should be -5/8 plus -3/4. This 5/8 needs to be negative, not positive. So if you look at the other 3, 5/8 is negative. 1, 2, and 3. All right, let's move on to number 3. Okay, let's just clean up our board. Number 3, we have 5/8 minus -7/8. So I see minus. Minus means to change this to add, and the opposite of what comes next. So 5/8 plus the opposite, which is 7/8. Now, what I really enjoy about this question is that the denominator is already the same. Numerator becomes 5 plus 7. Okay, 5 plus 7. Okay, we keep the denominator of 8 since it's already common. 7 plus 5, 12. So I have 12/8, which is improper. I'm now going to convert it to a mixed number. Numerator goes in, it's the dividend. 8 is the divisor. Set 8 goes into 12 one time with 4 left over. So my solution is 1 4/8. I'm going to divide both of these by 4 to get 1 1/2 as a final answer. You must reduce your solutions. So solution for number 3 is 1 1/2. Let's go on to number 4. So in number 4, we have -1 1/3 minus 1 2/3. So once again, I see minus, which means I change this to plus, and I take this opposite. So negative 1 1/3 plus negative 1 2/3. So some students like to make these improper. What I like to do is, sorry about that, is work with the fractions if I can the way they are. If not, convert them to improper. So I've realized that my signs are the same, so I'm going to add. So I have a negative plus a negative. So I'm going to take 1/3 and add 2/3. So negative 1/3 plus negative 2/3, that's negative 1. And I'm going to add to that negative 1 plus negative 1, which is negative 2. So this negative 1 comes from adding the fraction. And if you're wondering why I said negative, if the mixed number is negative, that means each part of the fraction is negative. So negative 1 plus negative 2 is negative 3. I'm going to show you number 4, converting everything to improper. And you'll notice we'll get negative 3 as well. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. So we get negative 4/3, plus 3 times 1 is 3, plus 2 is 5/3 negative. Okay. So since my denominator is 3, we keep it. 4 plus 5, I add because the signs are the same, I get negative 9. 3 goes into 9 3 times, so solution, negative 3. You can do this either way. Whatever makes you happy is fine by me. Okay, let's move on to number 5. Okay, let's clean up this board. So we have negative 1 minus 2 5/10. So we're going to rewrite this as add the opposite. So anywhere I see the operation minus, minus becomes plus. So negative 1 plus negative 2.5. So in the number 1, the decimal point comes after. So I can write 1 as negative 1.0 plus negative 2.5, or 2 5/10. So when I add decimals, I'm going to add them because the signs are the same. So I'm going to take these two numbers and just quickly add them. And decimal point goes straight down. Do you notice when I added these, I lined up the decimal point? Just going to move this over. So we get negative, because the signs are the same, negative 3.5 for number 5. Okay, let's move on to number 6. Okay, for number 6, we have negative 5 minus 5/3. So with questions like this, what you can do is make this integer a fraction, which is usually the easier way to go, or make this fraction a decimal. Now, I warn you, the only way that will work if this is a terminating decimal. If it's repeating, you can't write a repeating decimal and add and subtract from it. So if it's repeating, you must use fractions and not decimals. So I'm going to use fractions. I'm going to make this plus, so that means I'm going to make this opposite. So negative 5/3. So my integers, my rational numbers, they are both negatives. So in addition, when I have the same signs, I add. So I need common denominators. So between 1 and 3, if I take 1 and start counting by 1, I get 3. If I take 3 and start counting by 3s, so 3 is my smallest common denominator. So 1 times 3 gets me to 3. So 5 times 3 gets me to 15. Since this denominator didn't change, my numerator doesn't change. Now that I have common denominators, I keep them, and I'm going to take negative 15 and add negative 5 to it. Okay, I get negative 20 over 3. Now I divide. 20 is my dividend, 3 is my divisor. 3 goes into 20 6 times with 2 left over. So my final solution is negative 6 with 2 left over out of 3. Okay, so that's your solution for number 6. Let's move on to number 7. Okay. For number 7, we have negative 8 3/8 minus 10 1/6. So the first thing I want to do is rewrite this minus as add the opposite of this number here. So I'm going to take negative 8 3/8, add the opposite. Okay, at this point, we can do one of two things. We can make them improper or find common denominators. So I say let's find common denominators next. So I have negative 8 blank plus negative 10. So I have 8 and 6. So if I start counting by 8, eight times 1, 8 times 2, times 3, 4, 5. Okay, and we have 6. 6 times 1, times 2, times 3, times 4. So common denominator is 24. Okay, 8 times 3 gets me to 24. So 3 times 3 gets me to 9. 6 times 4 gets me to 24, so 4 times 1 gets me to 4. So I'm going to take the whole, everything is negative, so negative 9 plus negative 4 is negative 13 over 24. And then I'm going to take the whole numbers in the front and take negative 10 and add negative 8 to get a final answer of negative 18 and 13 over 24. Okay, let's move on to number 8. Okay, number 8, we have negative 1/2 minus negative 5/9. So I see minus. Let's work on the minus first. Let's make this plus and let's make this opposite. So we get negative 1/2 plus 5 over 9. Okay, so if I come over here and count by 2s, I get 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, and so on. And if I count by 9s, I get 9, 18, 27, 36, and so on. Common denominator is 18. All right, I'm just erasing this so I have room. You should not erase your work. Okay, here's 18. So 2 times 9 gets me to 18, so 9 times 1 is 9. 9 times 2 gets me to 18, so 5 times 2 gets me to 10. So when I look at my numerators, I have different signs. When the signs are different, I subtract larger absolute to smaller absolute. So 10 minus 9 equals 1 over 18. Okay, let's move on to number 9. 5 5/10 minus 8 1/10. Okay, what I'm going to do first is rewrite my minus. I'm going to make this plus. I'm going to make this guy opposite. So between two numbers, I can only have one operation, which is minus. So 5 5/10, I'll make you plus. So I'm going to make this opposite, which is negative 8 1/10. Okay, now I need to decide, am I adding or am I subtracting? Well, if I take a look at two signs, in addition, when the signs are different, you subtract. So since 8 has a bigger absolute value than 5, I'm just going to take 8 1/10 and minus 5 5/10. This is a 7. 11 minus 5 is 6. 7 minus 5 is 2. So I know I'm going to get an answer of 6 2/10. I just need to decide, is it positive or is it negative? Who gives you a bigger absolute value? So since 8 has a bigger absolute value than 5, my solution is negative 2 6/10. Okay, let's move on to number 10. Okay, so let's clean this up. Okay, let's take a look at number 10. We have negative 7 34/100 minus negative 5 51/100. So the first thing we want to do is rewrite this minus as a plus and take the opposite of this number. So negative 7 34/100, add 5 51/100. So I'm just going to take a look here in red, and I realize that my signs are different. So I'm going to just come over to the side and subtract these. Okay, I'm not rewriting the problem in subtraction. I'm just taking away because signs are different. So 4 minus 1 is 3. We're going to borrow here. 13 minus 5. And 6 minus 5. Decimal goes straight down. So I get 183. And since 7 gives me a bigger absolute value than 5, I keep the negative. Okay. And here is number 10. Let's move on to number 11. Okay, so for number 11, we're going to take 6 673 thousandths and subtract negative 8 29/100. So we're going to rewrite minus and the number after it as add the opposite. So it becomes 6 673 thousandths plus 8 29/100, because the opposite of negative is positive. So in this case, my signs are the same, so I'm going to add them. I'm going to take 6, and I'm going to make sure I line up my decimal points. This 0 here is optional. You can write it in if you want, or you can just leave it out. So 3 plus 0, 9 and 7, 6 and 2 plus 1. Decimal point goes straight down. 8 and 6. So since both of my signs are up here, since both of my signs are positive, my final solution is positive. Okay, let's move on to the next set. Okay, we're going to do 12 to 16 evens. Okay, so for number 12, we're going to describe and correct the error in finding the difference. So I know we've talked about this before, but this is the problem that's given up to the first equal sign. So my recommendation to you is solve this question and then compare your work to this work. I think the error in this one is pretty obvious. They took 3/4 minus 9/2, and they simply just stuck minus signs. So that's wrong. You know, when you work with fractions, you need a common denominator. You don't just subtract straight across. So the error is that the student did not find a common denominator. He or she just subtracted straight across. So all of this is wrong. So let me just mark this over. We're going to correct it. Take 3 over 4 minus 9 over 2. And we need to find our common denominator. So our LCD, or least common denominator, between 4 and 2 is 4. Okay, if you count by 2's and count by 4's, you'll see that 4 is the common denominator. Okay. So 4 for this first fraction doesn't change, so I keep the numerator. For the second fraction, I'm going to take 2 and multiply it by 2 to get 4. So I'm going to take 9 and multiply that by 2 to get 18. So what I have is a common denominator of 4, and my numerator is 3 minus 18. So if we look at this for a second and just cover the denominator, this is just like chapter 1 work, where we're going to take this and write it as 3, add, and take the opposite. Okay, and then what we're going to do is introduce the fraction back for the denominator and put the 4. So what is 3 plus negative 18? So since the signs are different, you're going to subtract and get negative 15 over 4. And we're going to rewrite that as a mixed number, so we divide. 4 goes into 15 3 times, 3 left over. So this equals negative 3 with 3 left over out of 4. Okay, so that's the correct solution. And here's just a summary of the solution we're looking for. So the description is they did not use, well, I guess I didn't write that correctly. They did not use the, there we go, started repeating myself. They did not use the least common denominator. Okay, so that was number 12. I'm going to move on to number 14. So for number 14, we're going to find the distance between these two numbers. So what that's saying is if I'm at negative 2.2, how far away, I'm just randomly drawing lines. How far away is negative 2.2 all the way to 8.4? How far apart? How many spaces are between them? So this is a range question. We're going to take the high and subtract the low. So minus means to add the opposite. This becomes 8.4 plus 2.2. 2 plus 4 is 6, decimal point, and 2 plus 8 is 10. So the solution to number 14 is 10.6. Okay, let's move on to number 16. Okay, for number 16, your sports drink bottle is 5/6 full. After practice, the bottle is 3/8 full. Write the difference of the amounts after practice and before practice. So write the difference of amounts. So what we're going to do is take our ending amount and subtract our starting amount, and that'll give us the difference between the two. So I need a common denominator between 8 and 6. So I'm going to start counting by 8. And I'm going to start counting by 6. And I can quickly see that 24 is my new denominator. I don't ever encourage you to erase any work. So you might see me erase stuff. Please don't do so. Your work is very valuable. Okay, 8 times 3 is 24. So 3 times 3 is 9. 6 times 4 gives me 24, so 5 times 4 gives me 20. So what I'm going to do now is rewrite this as add the opposite. 9 over 24 plus, and this becomes the opposite. It becomes negative 20 over 24. Okay, since my denominators are the same, I can put that here. My numerators, I have 9 plus negative 20. So since my numerators are different, I'm going to take 20 and subtract 9 to get negative 11 over 24. 20 gives me a bigger absolute than 9. So final solution, negative 11 over 24. Okay, let's move forward. Okay, evaluate. Evaluate means to solve, find the solution. So we're going to take these one at a time. I'll show you step by step what you need to do. It is important to understand that whatever I'm writing, you should be writing in your notebook. You shouldn't leave a lot of this stuff floating around in your head. So what I'm going to do, write the problem down. I see minus over here. So what I'm going to do is change this to plus and change this guy to opposite. So I have 2 and 1 over 6 plus 8 over 3 plus 4 and 7/9 negative. Okay, I recommend taking 2 fractions at a time because trying to find a common denominator between 3 fractions could be a bit taxing. So let's make this improper, so that's already improper. So 6 times 2 is 12, plus 1 is 13 over 6, plus 8 over 3. And we'll worry about this guy later. My common denominator is 6. So if I count by 6 and 3s, 6, 12, 3, 6, 9. So 6 is the smallest number they share. Okay, so what we're going to do now is take 6. To get to 6, we times it by 1. So that means we take 13 and times that by 1 to get a numerator of 13. 3 times 2 gets me to 6. So 8 times 2 gets me to 16. So I'm going to take 13 plus 16 and add them together. Keep my denominator of 6. So 16 plus 13 is 29 over 6. So what I've done so far is add fraction number 1 to fraction number 2. So what I'm going to do now is take this solution and add it to the next fraction. So I'm going to erase a little bit here. I do not want you to erase any of your work. Okay, so now I'm going to take 29 over 6 and I'm going to add to it negative 4 and 7 over 9. So I'm going to make this improper. So we have 29 over 6 plus 9 times 4 is 36. I'm going to add 7, and that gives me 13. So I get negative 43 over 9. Okay. Now I'm going to find a common denominator between 6 and 9. So 6 times 1 is 6, times 2 is 12, times 3 is 18. There's my common denominator. Okay, so I'm going to take these 2 fractions and rewrite them out of 18. This negative 6 times 3 gives me 18. So 29 times 3, I don't know. So I'm going to come over here. 9 times 3 is 27. 3 times 2 is 6, and 2 is 8. So I get 87 over 18. 9 times 2 is 18, so 43 times 2 is 86 negative. And I take a look at my problem now. I have common denominators of 18. I have 87 plus negative 86. Since my signs are different, I can subtract these. 87 minus 86 gives me 1 over 18. It's positive 1 because 87 gives me a higher absolute value than 86. So it took a little work, but we got there. So let's take a look here. Number 18. 1 over 18. All right, I'm going to erase the board and start on number 19. Okay, so for number 19, we have 6 and 59 hundredths. Well, let's take a look at this. This number is negative, and this number is negative. It's being subtracted. So it's this 6 and 59 hundredths plus negative 7 and 8 hundredths minus negative 2 and 41 hundredths. Sorry, negative 7 and 8 tenths. So I'm going to rewrite the problem, making sure the whole thing's in addition first. Okay, so this becomes plus, and this becomes opposite. So what I'm going to do now is take the two terms that have the same sign. So I'm going to take this guy and this guy here because they're both positives. I'm going to add them up. Then when I get my answer, I'm going to subtract this off because I'll have different signs. So 659 plus 241, 10, 10, 9. So we get, you can write 9.00 or 9.0, or you can just write both zeros in. So since I have two decimal places here, I'm going to put a 0 here. And since my signs are different, I'm now going to come here and subtract. So this becomes an 8. 10 minus 8 is 2. 8 minus 7 is 1. Decimal goes straight down. So my answer is going to be positive 1.2, since 9 gives me a bigger absolute value than the negative 7 and 8 tenths. Okay, that 0 at the end is optional. Okay, let's move on to number 20. Okay, so for number 20, we have negative 12 over 5 plus the absolute value of negative 13 over 6 plus negative 3 2/3. So what I'm going to do is evaluate those absolute value bars. So I have negative 12 over 5 plus the absolute value of this is 13 over 6 plus, and since these two are improper, I'm going to make that last ratio improper as well. So 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 is 11. So I have negative 11 over 3. So what I'm going to do is add my two negatives together first. So I'm going to start by taking negative 12 over 5 and adding negative 11 over 3. So my common denominator is 15 because both of these are prime numbers. So we'll use 15. 15. Okay, since these numbers are negatives, the negatives have to come along. So 5 times 3 gives me 15, so 12 times 3 gives me this negative 36. 3 times 5 gives me 15, so 11 times 5 gives me 55. My common denominator is 15. I'm going to add 36 and 55. So 5, 8, 9. So I get negative 91. Oops. So now what I'm going to do is add on this third ratio. So I'm going to take negative 91 over 15 and add to it 13 over 6. Okay, and if you write your multiples of 15 and 6, you will get 30 as a common denominator. So 6 times 5 gives me 30, so 15 times 5 gives me 65. 15 times 2 gives me 30. So 91 times 2, 9 times 2 is 18, so negative 182. So what I'm going to do now is take a look at my numerators, keep my denominator of 30. Since they're different signs, I'm going to subtract. I know my answer is going to be negative because this guy has a larger absolute value than this one. So I'm going to take 182 and just subtract off 65. Okay, this becomes 7, 7, 1, 1. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is reduce this by dividing. I'm going to turn it into a mixed number. So remember, the numerator 117 is my dividend, the 30 is my denominator or divisor. So 30 goes into 117. 4 times would be 120. So it has to be 3 times. That gives me 90. 7, 27. So my solution is -3. This is my integer. This is the remainder, so that's my numerator. And what I divided by is my denominator. Okay, so if we go back up and check the solution. Oh, awesome. So what I forgot to do is reduce my fraction. So let's take a look at 27 over 30. We can divide by 3. Divide by 3. So I get -3. 3 goes into 7 9 times. 3 goes into 30 10 times. Reduced. Okay. All right, let's move on to number 22 and 23, and we're at the end of this. Okay, for 22, a cook has 2 2/3 cups of flour. A recipe calls for 2 3/4 cups of flour. Does the cook have enough flour? If not, how much more flour is needed? So what we're going to do is take 2 2/3 and subtract 2 3/4. What we're going to do is make these improper. 3 times 2 is 6, and 2 is 8, minus 4 times 2 is 8, and 3 is 11 over 4. Common denominator between 3 and 4, if you write your multiple list, will be 12. 4 times 3 is 12, 11 times 3 is 33. 3 times 4 gives me 12, so 8 times 4 gives me 32. So my denominator is 12. My numerator is 32. I'm going to rewrite this as plus, and I'm going to take opposite. Okay, and that equals to -1 over 12, which means I do not have enough flour. I still need 1/12 of a cup more. Okay, let's move on to number 23. Okay, 23. So the new road that connects Uniontown to Springville is 4 1/3 miles long. So the yellow here, Uniontown to Springville, is 4 1/3 miles. What is the change in distance when using the new road instead of the dirt roads? So the dirt roads are these brown ones here. So if you needed to go from Uniontown to Springville, you had to walk down 2 3/8 miles and then over 3 5/6 miles. So this was your old route. This road here is your new connection. So we want to know what is the change in the distance. So what we need to do is add these two up first and then subtract it from here, and we can tell how much distance we save. So we're going to take 2 3/8 and add it to 3 5/6. So if you write your multiple list of 8 and 6, we get 24 for a common denominator. You could turn these into improper if you wish. So 6 times 4 is 24, 5 times 4 is 20. 8 times 3 is 24, so 3 times 3 is 9. So we get 9 24ths and 20 24ths gives us 29 over 24. 3 and 2 gives me 5. So what we're going to do is convert 29 over 24. 24 goes into 29 one time with 5 left over. So it becomes 5 plus 1 and 5 over 24, which equals 6 and 5 over 24. Right, that's the bonus to making the whole thing improper. You convert the whole thing at once. So walking from here to here is 6 and 5/24 miles. So now what I'm going to do is take 4 1/3 and subtract it off from here. So I'm going to take 6 and 5 over 24 and subtract 4 1/3. So if you write your factors of 3, 8 times 3 gives me 24. So my denominator is 24 minus 24. So times 8 times 8. Okay, so we need to subtract. So let's convert this all to improper. 24 times 6, 12, 14, and then plus 5, we get 149 over 24 minus 24 times 4, 96 plus 8, 14. So we get minus 104 over 24. Okay, so what we're going to do now is rewrite this as plus opposite. So 149/24 plus negative 104 over 24. So in addition, since my signs are different, we're going to subtract. So we get 5. So we get positive 45. The 49 gives me a larger absolute value over 24. And all I need to do now is convert this to a mixed number. 24 goes into 45 one time. So we get an answer of 1 and 21 over 24. And I believe we can divide this by 3 to reduce. So we get 1 and 7 over 8. So that means this new road saves us 1 7/8 miles. What is the change in distance? Using the new road. Oh, you know what? I subtracted this backwards because it says use the new road instead of the dirt. So I should have done 4 1/3 minus the 6 and 5 over 24, which is why the final answer is negative, because this is a greater negative than the positive. Okay, so final solution, negative. All right, great work, guys.